Hey my friends, welcome back to Kyle's Film Garage. Today is part 2 of the John Naulin interview from ReAnimator, makeup effects, film guy, awesome guy. So let's get right to it.
In the Battle of the Bulge, they literally used elements of the Ghost Army to make it look like their reinforcements had not arrived yet.
So this is all like the Post studio, like
Don Post did a lot of that sort of stuff, as and he got involved with John Chambers, and they did all kinds of special projects for the industry, and they also made masks that they sold to the public. And I came in and I took over the special projects side of it, all the film projects, TV projects, government projects. And I also took over the running the art department, the design, development, materials. And basically I was there for 5 years.
Right on. Basically, you got like a vast knowledge of all the chemical stuff and like how to do different things so you could have different applications. And
to this day, if you go to buy latex to make a mask, they will stick the number 407 on it. And that is based on the Don Post 407 R&D latex formula that Rob Daub, who was actually the R and the D from R&D, it wasn't research and development, it was his initials, Rob Daub. Rob Daub Sr., just before he retired, and I formulated. So the formula that is still emulated and the most trusted name for mask rubber still today is 407. And that's all based on a formula I did for Don Post back in the 1970s.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
That is so cool. So basically, all of the masks that people are wearing, like these days and whatnot, basically there's a bit of John Naulin in all of it.
A little tiny slice, a wafer thin slice of myself. Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So and I do a lot on the boards, like the Don Post Facebook boards and things like that, and I answer questions. And at one point I was. I as using the cumulative I as we, Don Post Studios, I was one of the largest importers of natural fiber hair, wool, in the United States.
Wow. When
it came to camel hair, yak, Scottish blackface sheep, all these sorts of specialty wools, I was bringing them in because we were using them in our upper end masks as hair.
Wow.
One of the special projects we did was for the Dark Crystal, for the Jim Henson Company. And they had these characters, the two lead characters were named Jen and Kira. Mm-hmm. And they had very long hair. And they also had very smooth skin. They were having trouble with the foam latex, which I was brought on to solve. I had just done a version of foam latex called R&D 318C, which we sold at Post. It was a product we sold. And they had, I'm trying to remember Jim's last name. Anyhow, they had their technician in New York at the Brownstone, the Henson Brownstone in New York. And we talked on the phone, and by the time I actually got back there, he had already solved the problem. Using a non-detergent wetting agent that we had talked about. Anyhow, so the bottom line is I was doing a lot of elastomeric research, and a lot of materials and paints and the natural fiber wools, and all of that led, and the special projects. I mean, we did 44 special projects in the last 2.5 years that I was there, including 156 still suits for the movie Dune, which were actually nominated under the costumes category, but the scene they showed was the still suits for an Oscar. And we worked with Bob Ringwood and Mary Vogt for that. We did, and I worked a lot with David Lynch directly. So I did a couple other things with David. And then after I left Post, I was doing some projects with a young sculptor that we had done some work with at Post, and we did some miniature stuff. We did some work for Battle Beyond the Stars, which is where I first met the Roger Corman Special Effects Department, which
that's
very
awesome.
few people know was James Cameron.
Wow.
All right, Robert Skotek, Dennis Skotek, and Mark Shelton. And Mark and I still are friends. We did a lot of work with Bob and Denny. We did a lot of work in fact, you and I met.
Yeah, no, Bob and
doing
just
a
for those
project
people who need to know who Bob and Denny are, they won the Academy Award for Aliens. For
they won 4 Academy Awards for visual effects.
Yeah, for visual effects.
Yeah, including the bits and pieces that were actually done optically for Titanic. And so I got involved doing stuff with them. They referred me to a project years later called Biodome, which has now become like this weird cult film.
Pauly Shore.
Yeah, Pauly Shore. They're actually talking about making a sequel.
Wow.
And the Biodome never existed. The Biodome, all 23 shots of the Biodome were a miniature and some forced perspective that was rather clever. There were some full-size elements of the interiors that they did with the truss work and stuff like that that they did on the back lot at Universal. But other than that, we shot it all out near Palmdale, and we shot it all in a 4-day period of time. Denny Skotek came out and headed up he was the DP, and he and Mark Shelton shot all 23 of those plates. So
that is great.
Bits and pieces. And one of the things that I learned is I've learned in the industry that storytelling is so important. The effects are not. I mean, the effects are like the frame on the picture. If it's not a good picture, the frame's not going to make it a good picture.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a really fabulous piece of art, if the story is really magnificent, you don't walk up and go, well, I really like the frame. I mean, if they've mated the frame to the story, to the story and the picture properly, you don't even see the frame, but it adds to the story.
Right.
It adds to the presentation. It adds to the effect. And that's exactly what I always tried to do, was to be the effect that added to the story, not the effect where people went, really cool monster, man.
Mm-hmm.
we tried to create characters that were based on certain elements of reality. I did a little tiny little film for Shapiro Glickenhaus called Maniac Cop. And I played around with actually a disease that the actor playing Maniac Cop, Robert Zadar, actually had, which is the fact that his bones grew out of proportion. The same thing is, it's similar to a version of the same disease John Merrick had in The Elephant Man. And so the bottom line is, this was based on something that was real. And so when you could augment it a little tiny bit, or point it out, or make it work for the story, it just added. It just made it cooler.
Mm-hmm.
All right. It doesn't replace it. It just makes it cooler. And that's kind of where I always went with, ReAnimator, From Beyond, all of that sort of stuff as well.
Okay, so ReAnimator and From Beyond. So what did you do on, because I'm going to use a thumbnail from ReAnimator. So what did you do on ReAnimator?
Well, I was in charge of special effects makeup for ReAnimator. When you do an effect, we call them gags.
Mm-hmm.
There were 86 gags in ReAnimator. And we shot the principal photography of ReAnimator in 19 days for $719,000.
Wow.
All right, just for you to understand, this was a really low budget movie. The director was the founder of the Organic Theater in Chicago. He had a theatrical background. He'd never done a film in his life, and which is not a bad thing. This was his first film, and he turned out to be an incredible visual storyteller, and that's Stuart Gordon. All right. In the first 3 days of the film, the footage was coming back really dark and kind of muddy looking, so they got rid of the director of photography, and they brought in a new director of photography who also just completely changed the whole thing. And he had a very, very strong, a guy named Mac Alberg. And Mac Alberg had a very European flair to him. And he really understood old-fashioned filmmaking.
Yeah.
And he really loved films like Frankenstein and things like that.
Classics.
And I can, I have told this before on camera, but I'll tell it again because it's my magic moment as far as that whole film kind of encapsulates in this moment. We were doing a gag. Stuart, myself, the performer, we're over, and I think Tony Dublin was doing a physical effect. He was doing all the physical effects and stuff, and he was doing a physical effect in association with it. And Tony and I were we shared title credit and stuff. So we're there together, and he also had the project first and got me the job. So credit's credit. All right, that's wouldn't have been there without Tony. So we're there, and we're working on this gag. And they had Stuart had told Mac Alberg where to put the camera and what was going to happen and all that sort of stuff. And so Stuart looks up at Mac and goes, so Mac, how does that look for you? And remember, Stuart was a theatrical director. He hadn't gone and checked this out through the camera. And Mac just looks at it, looks through the camera, looks back, looks through the camera, goes, Stuart, I'm certain this looks fabulous from where you are, but from over here, it looks like shit.
That's classic.
Yeah, and it was like, here's the educational moment on set is like, if it doesn't look good in the perspective of the lens, the camera, the vanishing points, things like that, it obviously you're telegraphing the effect. You're doing something that's not working.
Right.
So it's always how it looks through the camera. And so we shot the film. We went back and shot 3 days of post-production stuff. They used another makeup company to do some of the background makeups for some of the zombie type characters, John Beekler's company. And that was primarily, well, for two reasons. First of all, 86 gags with hardly, our budget for the effects on this was under $50,000.
Wow.
Under $50,000. And to do 86 gags, do the math. Sculpture, molds, castings, painting, foam, mechanics, all of that sort of stuff. They just don't happen without a certain amount of money. So we had no more money. We had a lot of people running around that were dead and reanimated in a couple of the scenes of the movie. So what do we, how do we do that? Well, Charlie Mann's company owed the producer of ReAnimator. He owed Brian some money, so he basically offered to have John Buechler and his guys come in and do certain things on the film. So the pre-title sequence in ReAnimator, I wasn't even there.
Oh, wow.
The whole thing where he's holding the thing up to his face and the eyes blow up and all that stuff. The quote unquote shot from Germany. I was not even in the building.
Crazy.
So I saw that for the first time in the first rough cast and crew screening. I will also tell you another little story is, the guy that played Dr. Hill, David was a classic actor. David Gale. He was a stage actor. He was somebody that Stewart had come in contact with in Chicago and really respected his work, talked him into doing this movie. And, looking at the original ReAnimator, which was released non-rated.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The head-on-head sequence.
Yeah, classic. You'll have to watch it to see it.
To believe it.
To believe it, yeah.
To believe it, yes. And in the original cast and crew screening, David Gale had brought his wife from New York. During the screening, she got up and left. She went to the hotel, she packed, left a note to him saying, if you want to do stuff like this, we're going to have a really long talk. And went and got on a plane and left the state.
Wow, that's crazy.
Wow, yeah. So very few people know that. And little did she know the film was going to come out. It premiered at the Cannes Film Festival. They had one copy. They had one print. And there were so many people in France that wanted to see this movie that they had 3 theaters. And they were taking reel by reel and running them from the one theater to the next theater to the next theater to the next theater.
That's amazing.
And literally having a group of couriers taking the reels from theater to theater to theater, so they didn't have people rioting in the streets of Cannes wanting to see ReAnimator. So,
wow.
And the film came out and did over $30 million in Europe, which by percentage of return on investment is one of the highest grossing films in history. And, several 100,000%, and it's like, who knew?
Who knew?
I knew that Stewart, I was one of 3 or 4 people that knew that ReAnimator was a theater of the absurdist type of comedy.
Mm-hmm.
It was not shot that way. It was most of the film, 90% of the film was shot dead on serious.
Yeah, and that's what sells it.
It was only in the magic of those other moments that the absurdist moments where it goes further and further and further beyond what you think it's going to go, that it becomes, just in shock value, it becomes funny. At the world premiere, which the U.S. premiere, was held in Hollywood, and we were at that screening as well. And my wife and I got behind 3 guys that were sailors, and obviously they didn't know that they were in line for a premiere. They saw a line for a movie. They thought, well, let's go to a movie, and they were wearing their sailor suits with their little sailor hats and the whole bit. And when we get to the head-on-head scene, they're like these 3 guys, and they're sitting there, they're going, oh no, there you go, he's not gonna, oh dear, and these guys are starting to grab onto each other's shoulders, and they're like, oh no, oh God, and as a storyteller, we're just sitting there, my wife and I are just sitting there afterwards like, well, we got them,
That's what you want.
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, another Stuart Gordon original story, based on a bunch of bedtime stories he told his daughters, you know. So, and we built we built the giant insects and stuff like that for that. And again, we're at the world premiere of that, and we're behind a group of kids. And when Auntie dies, sorry, spoiler alert.
If you haven't seen the movie,
it was made 30 years ago. Anyhow, so the bottom line is, you know, when Auntie dies, and these kids are crying, bawling their eyes out in front of us. Ah! And, you know, I mean, Auntie was 9 foot 4 inches of latex and polyfoam built on a puppetry frame. It was, it was in effect one way or another all the way through. It was also some stop motion technique. It was a new effect of using a split screen horizontally instead of vertically. You know, some really neat new toys that we played with, or they played with, and these kids bought it. 100%. Annie was real to them.
Yeah.
And Annie had just died. That's probably the best. That's probably the best critique I ever got for a film.
Yeah.
You know, these little kids, I made them cry. So, and please take that the right way, world. Do not cancel me. All right. It was my job to make them cry, and I did it, and they believed it. And if you believe, if you're going beyond the willing, you know, you bring your willing suspension of disbelief into a theater, and we managed to get it to the point where you actually believe it, and you don't walk away going, well, the digital looked a little, you know.
Yeah.
I hate that.
Yeah, agreed.
If I've done my job correctly, you shouldn't even know I was there.
Thank you so much for watching part 2 of the John Naulin interview. There's going to be another one, a part 3. Please click like on this, subscribe to the channel, join the channel, because we're trying to do a thing here. You know, let's make the YouTube situation paid for films, because that's what this is all about. That's why I do this channel, is so that one day, YouTube will be paying for our independent films. So please share this, spread this to your friends. I know you got filmmaker friends. I know you do. I know you have like film fans, horror fans. So let them know about this. So, all right, I will see you on the next video.